Christian Yelich was on track to being the 2019 MVP. But things didn't really go his way, as we'll later on address. Christian Yelich's 2019 stats were really good. I mean, crazy good. He played in 130 games, had 489 at-bats. He had 100 total runs, 161 hits, 328 total bases, around 30 doubles, 3 triples, 44 home runs, about 100 RBIs, 80 walks. He was really good this season. His triple slash was 329 batting average, 430 on base percentage, 671 slugging with an OPS of 1.100, which was better than his previous year, which actually did win MVP. So it was pretty safe to say he was easily the best player in the National League Central, if not the best player in the National League altogether. He was good. Sadly, his season was cut short, as you'll see later on. Brutal injuries. But 2020, after his injury, he was not the same guy. He played in 60 games just about, which was normal. It was a 60-game season. He had 200 at-bats, 40 runs, 41 hits, 80 total bases, only 7 doubles, a single triple, and 12 home runs. Now this is not the exact same thing as what Christian Yelich was the previous year. These numbers aren't really all that close either. He only had 22 RBIs. Now this is a 60-game season. Okay, there's half the games plus another 60 games lost there as well. It's 60 games out of 162 games. 100 games are missing here. Yet, his numbers say here, RBI-wise, he went from a 100 RBI season guy to 22 RBIs. Okay? That is a huge difference. 100 games shouldn't dock you 80 total RBIs if you're a player of this skill level, which meant he was not the same overall player. I mean, yeah, he was good. There was still an argument to be made that he was the best guy in the National League Central, but I mean, I feel like Josh Hader probably was the best guy in the National League Central. The whole Cubs organization was pretty not good back in 2020. I mean, none of the players that were considered high-level players competed at the same level as they had previously had. Christian Yelich wasn't good. The only player who did tremendously well that year, compared to his previous year, I would say was Paul Goldschmidt. Paul Goldschmidt went from high-caliber player base level to what he was like in Arizona back in that season. But still in 2020, he only had a 200 average. This was a guy who batted .330. League average is .250. He batted well below average. His on-base percentage was .350, from a guy whose on-base percentage the previous year was .430. That's a huge difference for a player. Slugging, .430 in 2020 from .671 in 2019. His OPS, however, which is probably the craziest number in my head, went from a 1.100 to a 786. 786 is relatively in reason to being around league average, from 1.100 being almost, you're gonna get an either way probably MVP award with those numbers. Next year, he wasn't even kind of the same player. Yeah, people on these teams are like, oh, well, that was just, the 2020 season. I mean, a lot of players underperformed, but none of these underperformances were like Christian Yelich. He was not the same player as he was back in 2019, even kind of. People say, oh, that was 1 year, but his current numbers in 2021, yeah, they're not great. He's only played in 9 games, whereas the current amount of games that should have been played is around 16. He has 30 at bats and 10 hits. Now that's a good batting average, but his triple slash, it's not much better than it was last year. His triple slash is only around league average right here, with a 333 batting average, a 460 slugging, or 460 on base percentage, a 367 slugging, which is terrible. That was worse than what he had last season, and an OPS of 826, which is right about league average. But I mean, that's really close to his last year's numbers, and his numbers last year were on the dot of probably where I would say league average really is, if not worse. But I mean, yeah, he was slightly better so far this season, but not by a huge amount. I mean, he has 12 strikeouts so far this season. He's only stolen 2 bases, which he's a guy who, in a healthy season, is a 30 base steal guy. I mean, he was in the 30-30 club back in 2019 with 30 steals and 30 home runs, which not a whole lot of players can even get into that club, but he was one of the very few players that season who was even close. I mean, he was in the 30-30 club. He was good. Whereas, last season he had a total of 4 stolen bases. 4. From a guy who went from 30 stolen bases down to 4. That's crazy. He should have had at least 8, maybe. 8 stolen bases, up to probably like 12. But no, he had 4. I mean, that's not the same kind of running pace he was at. Still, this season, he only has 1 RBI in 9 games. Now, that's understandable. That's not the best there is, but it's certainly not great. I mean, it's fine, but not everyone's has this, you should have more than 1 RBI at this point in the season. Terrible injury. Now, this doesn't look too bad initially, but wait for the replay on this. This was brutal, and I don't think he's coming back to the level he was at after this happened. His numbers just don't indicate that, he was a very good player after this injury happened. He hit it into his kneecap and dropped to the ground. This was going to be the MVP probably of the season, but due to the fact that this injury happened, he didn't have nearly good enough stats at this point to qualify as probably the best candidate for that. I mean, Yelich was on the ground. He was injured. They had to try and figure out what was going to happen here. He wasn't the same player. None of his numbers so far have, been anywhere better than these. There you go. That's why I don't think Christian Yelich will be returning to his former self. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends.